What's up, brother? How you doing? We are live.
Good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing really good. Sun is shining on me today, finally. It feels great. Sorry if there's a little glare in the background, but I'm enjoying it.
It's glowing in Chicago.
Good. Do I have the halo? No, not yet.
Nah, not really.
All right, cool. What are we talking about today?
Today we're talking about extreme ownership, which is going to be a good topic for me because I've got 4 days of torrential rain in San Francisco and in the midst of 75 hard. I've done a couple of rain days, but I'm pretty sure this is about to be a very wet set of workouts. And so I will be taking extreme ownership to go and get that shit done.
That's awesome. You know, the coolest thing about that is you have the opportunity to go do something difficult. Like, that's the total reframing. Real quick, before we even jump into extreme ownership, I remember that simple reframing that Goggins taught in his book. It's like, if it's 0 degrees outside and there's not a single person outside, instead of looking at it as I don't want to go outside, look at it as the world is providing me an opportunity to go outside in 0 degrees and do something really difficult instead of going out in 70 degrees and being comfortable. It's providing me this opportunity that I have to take advantage of. So for you to only have a few rain days, now when you look back at the end of your 75 hard, you're going to say, holy shit, I had 4 days of torrential rain I was running through. It was freaking insane. But those are going to be the most memorable days of your entire 75 hard journey. I promise you, because I've had that walking through knee-deep snow. Same type of shit. Most memorable time of the entire 75 hard journey. So it's an opportunity. You're going to fucking crush it.
Dude, I love that. I was picturing myself this morning. I'm taking a yoga mat out to the park and I'm going to be doing burpees in the rain. And I'm like, will I ever feel like more of a badass than doing burpees in the rain? You're watching people like running by you as the rain starts coming down, heading home, and there I am being like, bye-bye.
It's like Goggins says, I want to be that motherfucker that people go, who is that crazy mofo?
Like, that dude is crazy.
Yeah,
man.
They'll be saying that about you for sure.
Yeah, that's what I want. I'm gonna go out there in a t-shirt.
Perfect. That's awesome. I need a video. All right, cool. Let's jump in. So extreme ownership. Let's talk about what is extreme ownership. Go for it.
Before we jump into extreme ownership, let's talk about the problem. What is extreme ownership solving for? And it is not taking 100% ownership of the outcomes in your life, which ultimately means that you're in some form of a victim mentality. Just like when we talked about yesterday, the seed of doubt that you have about yourself can cause the law of attraction to collapse on itself. It's important to recognize that you not believing that you can control the outcomes in your life 100%, it crushes your ability to be 100% proactive about building the life that you want. And so you've got this seed of doubt that circumstance could keep you from having what you want. And without extreme ownership, you basically are saying the world is going to do things to me instead of having the mentality that I am going to impose my will and influence the world in the way and the vision that I have for it so I can live my life on my terms. And so I think this is a prevailing mindset problem in society that people, it's not 100% of the time, but for 20% of the things that happen to them will play the victim. And I don't think people make a big enough deal that 20% is so destructive because it allows your brain to slip out when I think things get the toughest, which is those critical times when you need to have a mindset about pushing through the bullshit and taking things to the next level.
When you feel like the universe is against you.
100%. And if you feel like that, guess what? It will be against you. And so extreme ownership is the solution to the problem of a victim mentality. I think it's the cure-all, and it's ultimately a reframe for you taking 100% responsibility for the things that happen to you in your life. And before we dive into the nuance of all this and the practice, I want to give the most extreme example of what I think extreme ownership could look like, or not the most extreme example, but an extreme example, just to set the tone for what extreme ownership could look like. And so example I came up with is lightning strikes your fucking house and it causes $100,000 worth of damage. Now, somebody who isn't in an extreme ownership mindset is going to say, damn, that was a freak accident. Woe is me. This really sucks. I can't believe that happened. And they're going to consider themselves a victim of circumstance when they're looking at what just happened. Now, if we take the inverse of that and we flip it on our head and we say, what does extreme ownership look like? You're going to look at what just happened here and you're going to say, how could I have prevented this? You didn't study the weather patterns to understand that lightning could have been a risk and put up a lightning rod so that when lightning strikes, your roof didn't get all fucked up. You didn't have insurance. You could have thought I hadn't had insurance to make sure that you're not going to have $100K in debt because your roof got fucked up. And so it's not to say that it's okay that these things didn't happen or that you didn't prioritize getting a lightning rod up on your house. But what is important is that you hold a perspective that you could have done something about these things, because otherwise that same victim mentality starts to creep in to the rest of your life. And so it's the way you look at one thing is the way that you're going to look at everything. And so shouldering the blame for anything that happens to you puts you in the driver's seat to start preventing things, building things, and living a life on your terms.
I'm going to give a couple more examples too, just to prime the episode. What you said with the lightning thing is that's exactly what it is. And then in other scenarios, like for example, we'll talk about our own personal situations later, but in business, if you own a company and somebody comes up to you and says, I didn't hit this deadline because my teammate did X, Y, and Z, and they blame their teammate, or they come in and say, I fucked up. It's my fault. I take complete ownership over this and it will not happen again. This is how I'm going to rectify the situation. As a boss, what response are you going to respect more? The one who's blaming someone else in some outside circumstance, or the one who's taking complete accountability and saying they're going to do X, Y, Z to rectify it? In your relationship, if somebody comes up to you and, you get in a fight with your partner and you blame whatever you did on some other outside action, or you come to your partner and say, I messed up. This is why I did this. I take complete ownership. I will not do this again. What do you think your partner is going to respect more? You blaming something else, or you taking incredible ownership, apologizing, and moving forward? I'm just giving those examples because you could apply this to every single area of your life. Something happens to your house. Something happens to you. Something happens to, your relationship. Something happens to your business. There's always the perspective of taking extreme ownership, and every single time, that is going to be the best response for you to have the best possible outcome.
Yeah, dude, I love that. When we were preparing for this episode, I hadn't really thought about it from the perspective of if you own your shit, everyone and everything will respond better to you. Because I think it's the action of being a leader, and it's being a leader of your own life. And so when you take that position and you shoulder the blame for whatever it is that's going on, it really changes people's perspective of you as a person of accountability, a person that acts like a leader and who takes charge in a situation. And so if not even for your own internal mindset shift to take place, everyone and everything that's going to be responding to you will look at you through a lens differently than the person who tries to slink away from what happened. And so it's part of an identity shift.
I'll give you an example of literally just today, right now. Super simple, right? It doesn't have to be a big thing at all. But this is a personal example in my own life where I used to have this feeling like if something would happen to me, for example, spilling coffee. Right before we hopped on this pod, I spilled my coffee. My AirPods wouldn't work. My mic stand isn't standing up. Like there's so many things that in a matter of 30 seconds just weren't going my way. Super small things, not a big deal at all. But the old me would have said, the universe is against me today. I'm just being tested. And I would have just let it spiral into more things and, going, and I'm sure the next thing that will happen to me will continue spiraling if I feel like the universe is against me. But instead, my first thought now, instead of spilling the coffee and thinking the universe is against me, it's I'm moving too quickly. I need to slow down for a second. I need to be present. The world's not going to stop if I'm 1 minute late. It's okay. The AirPods, I should have hopped on a little bit earlier and figured out what the issue was instead of waiting till the last minute. The mic stand, it's not a big deal. I could just hold the mic up with my hand. just little things like that. I'm gonna fix this now, but that's just such a small example though of how it in my own mind it saves me from having these negative thoughts and going down a negative spiral and feeling like shit for the rest of the day. Sounds silly, but I'm sure that you can relate where you spill coffee, you slip on something, you break a glass, and all of a sudden 3, 4, 5 things happen and you feel like the universe is against you this day, and the rest of your day is shit because of it. That's happened to me so many freaking times in my past, I can't tell you. And the identity shift now is just, no, I have complete control over spilling the coffee. I have complete control over the AirPods. I have complete control over the mics. Like, it's just that shift is way healthier for me for the rest of my day than feeling like the universe is against me.
So I want to pause this for a sec because I think in the matter of 10 minutes, we just touched on three major concepts that extreme ownership essentially it solves for your life, it builds in your life. And the first one that we're talking about, and I think we can dive in more to this, is that it turns you into a proactive force of nature in your life. It puts you in a situation where you're going to be taking action to get the things that you want because you believe that you have ownership over them. So that was piece one. Piece two that you put so eloquently was it changes how people perceive you when you are a person that takes ownership. So being an extreme owner is going to elicit a different response from your environment. The people that you interact with are going to view you as a leader and somebody who is in charge of what's going on. And then the third thing that you just pointed out that is fantastic is it is a way for you to control your internal state and how you're looking at the world. All of a sudden, like that internal dialogue you had about being a victim or feeling bad about these things that are happening, it allowed you to reframe and shift them to feeling empowered. And like you said, all of a sudden you're like, let me take a minute now to get my day reset. Why don't I slow things down? It actually caused you to like put into action things that made you feel better. And so as I'm saying it out loud, it was a form of self-love that you practiced and at a micro level, like made your day just better because you were able to think about things in a different way. And so like immediately on this episode, as we're breaking this down, there's multiple facets of just how important this is and the impact that it has at the macro level of what you're trying to achieve down to at the momentary level. If you can take extreme ownership, you're going to find a sense of resolution, resolve, and even calmness when I'm hearing you talk about this versus being frantic and caught up in a stressful moment.
That is 100% correct. I'm glad that you broke that down. Those are three exact ways that extreme ownership is powerful in your life.
So I can circle back to number one, because when a lot of the things we talk about right now, since we're early on in this pod, I think are the macro positioning of any given strategy for being a mindset mogul. Like if you're going to take extreme ownership, what does that mean for your life at the macro level? And ultimately, you're trying to build the life that you want to, and how does extreme ownership play into that? And so thinking about big picture items of where can you take extreme ownership in your life to really push things forward? And I came up with a couple of ideas, and I think that they're just examples of things that you can be taking extreme ownership on that can change the course of your life. And so the first one I came up with was building a team in your life. Like it is your responsibility to set yourself up with the right tribe of people that have the same values and the same priorities that you do, or mentors, whether they're silent mentors like we've talked about before, or mentors that you can find in real life, so that you build a team of people around you. You take extreme ownership for who's in your gravity to try and pull you and push you into the life that you're looking for. So that's piece one. The second thing is, or extreme ownership is a foundation for goal setting. Like ultimately you sitting down, figuring out what your goals are at the highest level. What is that vision? Building that purpose. Like extreme ownership is you figuring out what that purpose is and not saying, I hope that I find it. It's like, I will find it, and then figuring out how I'm going to go find that purpose. And then once you do, figuring out what is the strategy to get there. These are all things within your control. But once you recognize that these are my responsibility, I'm not going to just stumble into them. I'm going to go find them. It's a frame shift that now it's my purpose is to go find my purpose. which when I recognized that, it was a huge unlock for me because it made it my responsibility to go find my purpose. It's not the universe is going to drop this at my doorstep. I got to go do this, which then once that frame shift happens, now I'm starting to take action to go do those things. Once I realize it's my responsibility, then the action becomes table stakes. It's something that I have to be doing. And so you figure out what your purpose is, you figure out what your goals are, and then extreme ownership filters down into staying accountable to those goals. Like, once you realize that you own your habits, then you wake up on a daily basis and you realize like these are things that I need to keep leaning into. It's my responsibility to do these habits at no matter what the cost is, if this is really what my priorities are. And ultimately, it puts you again at this macro level of everything is my responsibility, which I think makes getting momentum, which makes even finding motivation a lot easier than in a situation where you expect things might happen to you. Instead, it's like, I got to go find it. I got to go sniff these things out. I got to go do this. And so I can personally say that like the frame shift in my life, that everything that happens to me is my responsibility, has led me to be more committed to getting all of these things done.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. I'm curious about a time in your life that you can point out that extreme ownership has come into play, or, you know, I'm sure there's been scenarios in your business or something where maybe something I said earlier is a similar thing has happened. Or
I honestly, now that you brought this up, I can actually talk about like, I think when this frame shift happened, and I think it was probably, now looking back, like 3 or 3.5 years ago. And it really was, it came down to a practical need in the business that I was running. I was running a cannabis beverage manufacturing business, and I didn't know anything about beverage manufacturing. And early on, because of that, it was really easy to be like, when shit was going wrong, that it wasn't my fault because I didn't come from a beverage manufacturing background. I had this huge excuse built in that I wasn't a beverage manufacturing guy. So I didn't need to, like, when things happen, it was like, oh, like, how could I have known? I'm not a beverage manufacturing guy. But when you're the CEO of something, in the same way that when you're the CEO of your life, like, everything was my responsibility. And I can't point to the exact moment when that clicked, but it probably happened about 3 or 4 months in, when I had to take a step back and say, no, when the canning line goes down, it's not like, oh, how did that happen? It's like, no, I didn't have enough preventative maintenance or parts in the facility to get that shit fixed. That's on me to not have those corners seen around. When an employee quit, it's not like, oh, that guy is just like, screw him. Like, I can't believe he would do that to us. It's, I didn't cultivate the right relationship with that employee to keep him as part of the organization. There was one where the power went out, like literally the plug got pulled on us by PG&E. And because of that, we had a really bad financial day and we lost money that month. And instead of saying it's PG&E's fault that we didn't have a profitable month, as the CEO, it was my fault that we didn't make enough money the rest of the month that we were profitable for that month. And through that, it caused me to take a lot more action to be a CEO who knew what the hell was going on in a beverage manufacturing facility. It took me from a state of inaction to one of proactivity, where becoming a learner needed to be my identity so that I could become an effective CEO in an industry, in a situation in which I was really unfamiliar. One thing I just want to touch on at the tail end of that, taking responsibility as the identity of a learner. Extreme ownership doesn't mean you need to have all the answers. It needs to mean that you are committed to having the mentality to get the answers. And so with everything we talk about in this show, having the identity as the humbled learner, like, it's okay not to know things. It just needs to be your goal to get 1% better every day at the thing that you're chasing. And so
it's not to cut you off, but on that same point, and once you understand that you can be a learner and learn anything, that's when the true power kicks in, because the switch really becomes going from, you know, this is happening to me, this is who I am. It's basically changing from it's extreme ownership has a lot to do with changing from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. It's basically understanding that I'm not fixed in this place. I have the ability to do anything I want to do. I have the ability to learn anything I want to learn. But it's up to me to take the ownership and actually go and do those things. For example, just super big examples, right? One, when I wanted to quit my job, I waited for so long thinking that something was going to come and save me, when in reality, I just needed to take ownership that I needed to become better in order to be able to quit my job and build that business, which I did. Same thing with losing weight. I kept thinking, well, I'll wait until I have money and I can hire a private chef. Stupidest shit I've ever said in my life. But
You're
it's
literally
like,
waiting for somebody to come help you.
I'm
Like,
literally waiting for, they
Jesus.
say nobody's coming to save you. I was fucking waiting for somebody to come save me multiple times.
You were like quite literally waiting.
Quite literally waiting.
Yeah.
Like I just felt like something was going to happen in my life, even though I wasn't doing anything to make it happen. And when I switched flipped that switch to, wait a second, I can do this. It just is going to take me doing this. Once I flip that, it sounds so simple, right? But it's like, once you truly understand that you can do whatever you want to do that's within the laws of physics, you just have to take ownership and go and acquire those skills or do whatever you need to do. That is when your life changes, instead of thinking that you're just stuck in this place playing the victim mentality. It works in big moments like quitting your job or losing 100 pounds, or it works in small moments like spilling your coffee and not having your AirPods work. Like, it's applied in business, family, relationships, career, everything. It is applied.
The other example I wanted to give, because I think extreme ownership, the roots of it are in like corporate consulting. It's like, how do you run good teams? But the reality is it's even more important to apply it as a fundamental truth of how you live your life. But outside of business, like thinking about family, this is something that I recently decided I need to take extreme ownership on. But I moved away from Chicago as part of doing the business ventures that I have to California. And so as part of that, I've always had a really good relationship with my sister, but the distance definitely has an impact on when I would see her on like a weekly basis to now that I don't see her, and the phone calls start to fall off and the relationship just can dwindle as a function of what? And it used to be in my mind that, what? It's distance. That's just how life goes. Bullshit. That's not me taking enough responsibility for a relationship that I want to cultivate. And so I had that like point of recognition a couple of weeks ago, and I called her and I said, "Hey, we're going on a trip together to go like hiking in the mountains." And so
That's awesome.
so I'm like thankful for extreme ownership, because all of a sudden I was like, wait a second, I can control the type of relationship that I have with my sister. Like, that's me picking up the phone. It's booking a flight and picking a weekend. Like, one thing that you were talking about earlier on, this was like 2 minutes ago, was just on the modicum of you went from waiting to just taking actions. And when you were talking about the actions, they essentially were very like, and I know this is just small actions that you took to start getting what you want. You didn't say like, how am I going to lose 100 pounds? You just started like doing
5 minutes a day.
Right, 5 minutes a day. You did the smallest common denominator action you could have to get what you needed to like start getting things done. And I think that that's an important concept, that extreme ownership sounds like this big thing. Like you need to figure out how to turn your life into what it is that you want. No, extreme ownership is also just taking the micro action. Figure out the smallest thing that you can be doing to get what it is that you want, and understanding that you can be tactical in moving things forward just based on small actions. And so instead of me thinking about like, all right, how do I like put together a year-long call schedule with my sister, this big plan for us to have a better relationship. It's like, no, just do what are the smallest things I can be doing? I can make one phone call, I can book a flight, I can pick a weekend, and we can go spend time together and just start there. And I think that just is part of extreme ownership. It's just take little actions to push yourself forward, even though it sounds like this daunting big thing that you need to be doing in your life.
I think that's perfect. Honestly, I think that's a great place to wrap for the day. I think we should, given what you just said on taking action and doing something just to get started, I think we should leave them with an exercise. So what should we have the audience
So
reflect on after this episode.
100%. So we've got a couple of questions here. I think these are best written down and take 10 to 15 minutes to do this exercise, but I'll walk through what the questions are, and then I think you can do that after the show. And so the first one is, where is a time that you felt powerless or that you were a victim of circumstance? Reflect on that, and it can be recent, it can be in the past, it can be little things, it can be big things, but choose 2 to 3 things where you can identify that you thought in your head that it's unfortunate that that happened. I wish that didn't happen to me. And get those things down on paper. And then once you've got those down, now ask the question, what steps could you have taken to change the outcome of that situation? And that's either proactively or are the things you could have done to mitigate that situation after the fact. And it's okay if the things you needed to do to prevent it were ridiculous, but just identify that there are things and what they could have been to do to prevent those situations. Put that thought into your mind and get it onto paper. And then finally, and I think most importantly, what are 3 things that you could change today that would reflect you taking extreme ownership in your life? I think this is thinking that bigger picture, that macro. What are 3 things today that would look differently if you were taking extreme ownership? And figure out what those things are. And then now, even more important than that, how does your life look after you make these changes of taking extreme ownership in those areas of your life? And so sit with that. And I think that last piece is the most critical piece. Is I want you to get very specific. I want you to visualize. I want you to really feel how it would feel if you were taking extreme ownership in these portions of your life. And so I'll leave it with that.
That was the perfect way to end it. All right, so you got some exercises, and I think that this is going to be, if you aren't already living like this, it's going to be a big game changer for you. So
Game changer.
I think this was great. Thank you guys for tuning in. Please like, comment, leave us a review, do the duties. We really appreciate you, and we will see you in the next one. Thanks, Brad.
All right. Take care.